Welcome everybody to Business Monday. It is a gloomy Monday afternoon, but who cares? The Sox have won the World Series. I'm Josh Fenton. We're at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. This is Gary Sass, the money man, head of the Hassenfeld Institute up at Bryant University. Let's first talk the Red Sox. Southerner, good Southern boy like you. Do you cheer for the Atlanta Braves, or are you a Red Sox fan?
I'm a Red Sox fan. I guess when the Atlanta Braves stole Seminoles Tomahawk chop, that was divorce at that point.
That was divorce. Yeah. It was straight up plagiarism. Yeah. You moved north to the Red Sox.
Well, but except most of the boys that play on the field are from the South.
Yeah, so, that's right. How late did you stay up Friday night?
3:46.
You made it all the way through?
After quite a struggle, explaining to my wife why she should go to another room. I'm watching the game.
Saturday night, did you make the whole game?
Saturday night was back and forth between football and baseball.
And then last night you saw all nine. Good for you. You win a golden paper cup here
at
competition. It was good competition. It was exciting games. Gave a little life to baseball. They might have done a little better if they actually got the games over before 11 o'clock at night. But
they don't want kids to watch baseball anymore. Though I would make one suggestion about how the World Series share should be split up. I think Dave Roberts ought to give his share to charity, his favorite charity, because he gave the Sox gifts during the whole time.
Alex Cora in Game 4 almost served it right back over, but redeemed himself. And David Price goes from doghouse to the front row, right?
Yeah, but one thing I really like is, as a baseball fan and baseball purist and played some, the Dodgers are taught with this uppercut swing, everything out, and the Red Sox are taught a little bit of that, but much more traditional. And it really was a victory for old-fashioned baseball that hit the ball where it's pitched. Don't try to lift it 6,000 feet in the air, because they were doing that, and the shortstop and second baseman were having a field.
So that was the good news this week. The bad news was we probably had one of the more disturbing weeks going on. You had down in Louisville, you had a man try and get into a black church, got rebuffed, walked over to the Kroger's and shot 2 African Americans. You had the pipe bombs going out to 13 different leading Democrats or news organizations. And then Sunday, you had the mass killing at a synagogue in Pittsburgh. Bizarre, disturbing, sad, lots of incoherent political motivations, it appears like. What does it say about our state of politics here in America?
Well, it says something about America. It says something about mental health. It also says something about people look for a political answer to every question. It's nuts.
Yeah.
The guy that killed the people in the synagogue was an outright anti-Semite, and anti-Semitism existed long before we had this political divide in the country. The fella sending the bombs to 13 Democrats and news organizations, clearly, had mental problems, and so we have to be very conscious, very security conscious. But let's not get carried away and say every time a crazy person acts out, it's the fault of the Democrats for being too liberal, it's the fault of Trump for being too wordy, rambunctious, et cetera. There's some of that there. There's some of that gets into the atmosphere, but you need to be very careful. And when you talk about extremism and anti-Semitism, I think it's important to have it confronted because cases of anti-Semitism have been increasing. But they've been increasing on both the left and the right. You go to a college campus today, and you see and you hear some of the pro-Palestinian students and the anti-Semitism they express, and the absolute hatred for fellow students that happen to be Jewish, compared to this crazy guy that went into the synagogue in Pittsburgh. We've got to start liking each other. We have to be more vigilant. And as Americans, one of the strengths of Americans, so one of the best speeches I've ever heard on the need for tolerance was Ronald Reagan when he spoke about that hate had no place in America. It's a classic speech. Everybody should go back and listen to it. And so if there's a political fallout from this, it means people on both sides, ought to be focusing on that we don't hate each other. And where it becomes a political problem, I don't think people who oppose me politically are evil. I just think they're my opponents. And,
Right.
and we have different points of view, and I go out and drink a beer with them, or watch a football game with them, respect them, and like them. And there's too much getting into the atmosphere and into the political water that if somebody's not with you, they're evil. Well, they're not evil. And that has to change. And so that's one place where politicians on both sides can and need to watch their rhetoric and not frame their opponents as anything more than just people who have different opinion on a specific subject.
Haven't we also lost the narrative that I may agree with you on this issue and disagree with you on that issue? That there were, there's a wide sweeping array of different litmus tests. And listen, I may not agree with you on the issue of sexual orientation or abortion, but I might agree with you on tax issues or something else. And we've seemed to have broken that down, that it's either left or right, and there's no one in the middle. You're involved with a group called No Labels. It's an effort nationally to really try and strip off some of these structures, these requirements that someone is either a Democrat or a Republican, and there's no middle ground. Talk a little bit about the philosophy behind this effort.
Well, GoLabels was founded about 2010, 2011, and it was founded by both Democrat and Republicans. Joe Lieberman was behind it. Later, Huntsman got involved with it. Representative Tom Davis, who was a Republican from Virginia, Nancy Jacobson. And the basic mission of GoLabels was to stress problem solving in government, to stress bipartisanship, to fight hyper-partisanship that made it more difficult to compromise. They recognized that a majority of voters were frustrated by the dysfunctional way that our both political parties were acting. They were frustrated by the dysfunctional way our Congress was trying to do its business, and they came together to promote problem-solving, bipartisan solutions to problems. They worked on budget reform back in 2010 and 11. They worked on fast-tracking presidential appointments to have the president get an up or down vote on an appointment within 90 days, and a series of other things. There was a recent poll that was done by Harris, and it was a pretty extensive poll. It had a national poll, and it had an error rate of just 3%, plus or minus 3%. And what that poll found was that 86% of likely voters, wanted more bipartisanship, more compromise. 70% of the people felt that both political parties were controlled by their extremes, and there were less people in the middle. And about 2/3 supported some reforms, which we may speak about in a few minutes. So the system is being dysfunctional. It's not being responsive. A lot of the blame, I think, falls on the leaders of both political parties. It's not a Republican or Democrat problem. It falls on the dysfunctionalism of Congress, and there are very easy ways to fix this. It doesn't require brain surgery. In 2018, just recently, in June, the No Labels group came out with a series of reform recommendations on reforming the way Congress operates, to change the rules in the House. And the theory was pretty simple. It said, with a new speaker coming on board,
Regardless of who controls Congress, Paul Ryan stepping down, so if the Republicans hold the House, they'll have a new speaker, obviously, if the Democrats take over.
Yeah, right, and they called it the Speaker's Project. And the Speaker's Project said this, in summary, that no member of Congress should vote for a new speaker until the Congress, we're talking about the House, not the Senate, until the House basically adopted reform rules so it could run more effectively. And this was picked up by a group called the Problem Solvers Caucus. And the Problem Solvers Caucus consists of 48 members, 24 Democrat, 24 Republicans, and they put out a series of suggestions in a report called Breaking the Gridlock. And what they basically said is don't vote for speaker until these basic reforms are implemented. To date, 20 members of Congress said they plan not to vote for speaker, and the number's growing until there are new rules, and we'll talk about the new rules in a second to make the Congress operate in a more bipartisan
But
fashion.
isn't a little bit of the problem, and I don't mean to diminish this, but the founders of this organization are, for the most part, not in office, right? Because if I'm a thoughtful, middle of the road, Republican or Democrat, and I want to work with my counterpart across the aisle, what happens to me? I get primaried by an extremist. I mean, Richard Lugar got beat, what was it, 6 years ago? Senator from Indiana, Republican, thoughtful, hardworking.
I worked with him years ago in the 70s when he was mayor of Indianapolis. I remember his start very well, and they created that uni government in,
Absolutely.
in Marion County in Indianapolis. But there, I think
And he got beat by an extremist Republican who had no chance of winning the Senate seat because he was so extremist. But Republicans in that primary voted for the challenger. He got beat by the Democrat, and they, their view was, just want to get rid of Richard Lugar.
Well, let's talk about a strategy and how you leverage and how you get more bipartisan and more moderate leadership in both parties. So the No Labels group, there's a problem solvers caucus created in the House. Now, when you think about it, we hear about the Freedom Caucus, which is a right-wing group in the Republican Party. I think they have about 40 members of the Freedom Caucus. There are 48 members of the Problem Solvers Caucus. The Problem Solvers Caucus is not No Labels, but No Labels is helpful to them in generating, ideas and such. And they said, okay, we have to get leverage. We are elected officials, and your point's well taken. Well, how do we get leverage? Well, if we elect the speaker and we don't change the rules first, then we're finished. So let's withhold our vote on the speaker, which is a political action. It's done by partisan people. Right now, as I said, 20 members of Congress are not going to vote for the speaker unless the rules are changed or there's consideration of changing the rules. So that is a direct political response to your question. And so if you could get that done, then you begin to break down the gridlock. And some of the reforms they recommend are very obvious reforms. Right now, John Bono left the speakership, and I thought he was a pretty good speaker, Republican from Ohio, because of the threat of somebody from his caucus calling for a motion to vacate. Now, one member of Congress right now, or the House, can call for a motion to vacate. So if you've got 40 people in a caucus on the left or right, you're always a captive to that.
Absolutely.
And so one of the rules that is being suggested is that the motion was technically called a motion to vacate, get rid of the speaker.
Right.
Require 1/3 of the members. So you can't take that motion up to 1/3 of the members. Would push that forward. We still have to get the vote.
Sheldon Whitehouse voted for a couple of Donald Trump's appointees for confirmation on the floor. There was about 5,000 people demonstrated against Sheldon Whitehouse from the left. He had a meeting up at Nathan Bishop Middle School on the east side of Providence. There was about 3,000 people there. They shouted him down. They ruckused. It's an intimidating. So here is an example of a Democratic senator in a Democratic state taking on some issues, and we haven't seen him vote for a Trump appointment since that event since then.
Well, we're talking about changing the House rules. How do you create rules that are conducive to bipartisanship? That's the question. So he has company when he does this. There's company on the Republican side when they have to do the same thing. This has been done in this country before.
Right.
In 1923, Republicans in the Congress, the moderate Republicans, refused to vote for a speaker until they fixed up the rules. And they were largely successful because they had reached gridlock at that point. And so what the No Labels group and what the Problem Solvers Caucus is trying to do, and they're trying to do it in a pragmatic way. It's not pie in the sky. Changing the rules by which the House operates is it's the most political of political activities. So one idea was to vacate the speaker. Another interesting idea, right now, a bill in the House is given a rule. It could be either a closed rule or an open rule. If it's a closed rule, which are most of the major legislation, you can't amend it. So what's being proposed is that to break the gridlock on a closed rule, if 2/3 of the House sponsor the bill, it could go forward. If the majority of each party sponsors the bill, it has to get a rule within 30 days and be voted up or down on the floor. We didn't get immigration reform. We didn't get balanced budget. I can go through a litany of things, where there's gridlock. It's not because people in Congress who are very capable didn't have ideas and solutions and compromises to deal with these issues. It was the leadership was not in a position to let these things out of committee for a vote on the floor. So you're beginning to see, as I described, the kinds of practical things, I think they're very pragmatic, that are being done. Make it harder to get rid of the speaker. Don't hold the speaker hostage to one faction by requiring 1/3 of the people have moved to vacate the chair. Have more open rules, so legislation, if a majority want an open rule, it's just, you need to protect, there have to be minority rights in any democratic process. But if 2/3 of the members say we want an open rule, or the majority of each party membership wants an open rule, then it gets an open rule and gets to the floor. If it gets to the floor as a member from Rhode Island, I can propose amendments to the bill. I can work with cross-party lines. I can work, within my party to do something. So those are the kinds of things that, are being proposed by the Province and Solves Caucus.
The last time we saw a major initiative like this that really took hold was probably Graham Rudman Hollings on budget cutting in the late 1980s, I want to say, and that was a bipartisan effort from, leading fiscal conservatives on both sides of the aisle. It had a big impact for a period of time on lowering the deficit. We've got a runaway deficit right now, really cooking at a record pace. And in all the narratives, in all the states, in this, heavily fought, most expensive midterms, we're not hearing a lot about fiscal issues relating to the debt.
You're hearing nothing. And, as a fiscal conservative and a Republican, is that if this really goes against the grain of, what I consider a
Core belief of the Republican Party.
A core tenet of good government. Balanced budgets, you spend what you have, be prudent about debt. Well, what I've just described, you can't get there. You can't pass a balanced budget, with the current system, because there's no way to amend the budget. There's no way to have an open rule on the budget. The speaker, there were several speakers that Bonner and Ryan who wanted to, work across the aisle. They were held captive by one person or by a caucus of their party, a minority caucus of their party. And so when that situation happens, you can either continue to do the same thing, and politically it's like banging your head against a brick wall, or you can say, can we change the rules by which we operate? Not to, changing the rules is not a solution in itself.
Right.
But changing the rules gives you an opportunity to counter what exists right now. It counters the extremism on both sides. And, I think that from the polling data from the Harris Company, a majority of people would like to see their congressman or their senator be more moderate than right now. But right now, the way the parties are structured, it becomes, very difficult. And it's also the self-survival of our two-party system, because the fastest growing group of voters in most states, and certainly nationally, are independents. And I think there's a lot of value in a two-party system. Two-party system gives you an organizational infrastructure from which to reach compromise. But if you get to Congress and your party is controlled by the extremes, the rules are so gagging and so tight.
Well, let's go to the House. The House is likely to turn Democratic into Democratic control. If you look at all the prognosticators and all the analysis, Ezra Klein, etc., and the likely speaker to be elected is Nancy Pelosi from California, a very liberal speaker. and a very divisive, most Republicans are running ads against her, not their opponent in many House races. How does that work? I mean, how do you get one of these, listen, she runs the same playbook every time she's speaker. She runs the same book every time she's the minority leader in the House. How do you change that dynamic?
Well, first of all, she's a very capable legislator.
Right.
And so we don't underestimate her. But what I've just described is the question you should be asking is how do you get leverage to change the conduct of leadership?
Right.
Well, these are all scenarios, if one party has a 100-vote majority, it's going to be very hard to get leverage. But let's say one party has a 23-vote majority that exists right now, or a 30-vote majority, and if the Democrats split 23 and 23, that's 50 seats. If there are enough Democrat rank and file and enough Republican rank and file to give each other cover and say, we're not voting for Nancy. We know Nancy's going to be the next speaker. We're not putting up anybody to run against Nancy. But we're not going to vote for speakership until there is action by the body to change the rules. And I think it's in Nancy's self-interest, as she gets near the end of her career and looks forward to what her legacy is going to be the speaker that finally is in charge when this gridlock's broken. Or if the Republicans maintain control of the House, which is very unlikely right now, whoever the Republican speaker is, that's a hell of a way, to start off your leadership. And all this is saying to Nancy, it's in the speaker's best interest. If I'm speaker and one member can hold me captive and make a motion to vacate the chair,
right,
Nancy's not going to have it any easier than Paul Ryan had it or John Bonner had it. So that's to her advantage. If there's more legislation where her rank and file can amend bills on the floor, it makes life a lot more complicated for her, and it requires more and more legislative skills to bring people together. But just think of the accomplishments she could have, her party could have, if they're in the majority, getting something done. I'd love to go back to the American people. If there's a Democrat House, I'd love to go back to the American people in 2020 and say, yeah, we passed a balanced budget. Yeah, we fixed immigration. Yeah, we did something on health care. Right now they can't.
No, not at all.
And so the leverage, so the question is, now is the time to use the leverage to try to make those changes.
When David Cicilline first got elected, he was the co-chair of a bipartisan caucus in the House. Best as can be evaluated, they had a bowling party together and did little else.
Like bowling alone?
Like bowling in a bowling alley. And little else, and that caucus has frittered away. Rhode Island's delegation, according to the Georgetown University's analysis of bipartisanship, has found that the Rhode Island delegation is one of the most isolated, one-party voting. Almost all the members are leaders in their chambers. Isn't some of the burden on voters? Voters on both sides complain about the logjam, the dysfunction of Congress. Don't they need to send some messages across the board?
Just to be a softball, you know what you just did? you know I have a position on the race for senator. There's one of the two candidates, that's his platform primarily. So, yes, of course. I think, but the question, was a chicken or egg kind of, question. If the House operates with the kinds of rules that the Problem Solvers Caucus is suggesting, and if the House can then show progress and can show it can behave in a rational, functional manner, that helps incumbents, running for office. David Cicilline, I think, was a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus and No Labels Group when he first came in. He's no longer, a member, and you have to use leverage. This is about politics. This is not some kind of esoteric activity. No Labels and the Problem Solvers Caucus in Congress have a very tough, very real politic, game of using the election of a new speaker, trying to use it to use that leverage to change what's going on up there. That's all this is about right now. And that train doesn't come across the tracks every day. It doesn't stop every day. It's going to stop next January when we elect a new speaker. We know that.
Well, last issue, we're a week and a day away from Election Day. We're on Monday, tomorrow's Tuesday, and a week later is Election Day. Your closing thoughts, you're not going to be here next Monday, on where we are. Let's just talk about the governor's race.
Well, I have, one of the reasons I don't want to be here next week is to answer the question you just asked. I'm not
So we moved it up a week.
You heard me.
Yeah.
But, no, I'm not going to, make any political projections. You and I can both read the same polls. If you believe the public polling, and that's the only data that...
I believe one of them. That's the only one I believe.
I see the way I look at polls, and I think there have been 3 or 4 responsible polls, professional polls done, as I do what Real Clear Politics does. I take an average of 3 polls, and that's great. And if you take the average of the polls, it's clear the governor has a 7 to 10 point lead if those polls are right. If those polls are right, it's very hard for any challenger, particularly in a strong economy and with the governor's, whether she's right or not. I think governors get too much blame when the economy goes bad, too much credit when it's going good. But that being said, if you have a 7 to 10 point lead and 3.9% unemployment, that's a hell of a mountain to climb. And then it becomes very complicated with the third person in the race.
Right.
Who's, and I just think it's so unfortunate. Not that the third person runs, everybody has a right to run, but to run, if you're going to run, don't take oxygen out of the air. This campaign has been very unfortunate. Think about what we've heard this campaign. We've heard from one side why the incumbent, is mismanaged, and there's been some mismanagement. We hear from the other side that things are great, but we really haven't had a good debate of how you're going to make things better, how you're going to fix up the way government is being operated. And so I'm sitting here as a voter and saying, well, who has really won my vote? Who has set the message, a vision, that I can believe that, this is how things are going to operate and things are going to be better. I think that's the unfortunate part of the campaign, because it had more elements of a circus than of a serious political campaign in some ways.
I appreciate it. The money man, Gary Sass, here from the Hassenfeld Institute at Bryant University. Great insights into a strategy to break up the partisan divide down in Washington, D.C. We're going to take just a couple-minute break, and we're going to be back with Megan Decker from G Media. She's the CEO, president at the agency, talking about some of the initiatives that they're working on with a host of different global clients and what she's seeing in the world of marketing. We'll be back at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center in just a minute. Thanks so much. Welcome back, everybody, to Business Monday. We are here at the Navigant Credit Union Broadcast Center. I'm Josh Fenton. She is Megan Decker. She is the president up at G Media Studios. What's going on, Megan Decker?
Busy, busy, busy. Yeah.
Overwhelmingly busy?
Yes.
That's good. That's
Yes.
the economy,
Yep.
right? Talk a little bit about some of the initiatives. I think last time you were on about 3 or 4 weeks ago, we talked a little bit about some of the things that are going on in one of your firm's specialties, blockchain and cryptocurrencies. How's that segment of the world performing?
It is going very well. I will say we are working with a lot of blockchain and technology firms, but we
Yeah.
are not the experts in the blockchain space. And that's been a lot of the conversations that we've been having as we're kind of building our portfolio in this area. It's an area we want to grow with our clients in, but we absolutely look at it as a collaboration. And we say that really right off the bat as, we are the brand strategists and expertise in that space. And, we work with the experts in the blockchain space.
One of the things when you're an agency and you're working with multiple companies in the same business sector is one of the reasons why they're hiring you is you have expertise in branding or public relations.
Exactly.
You have to be careful not to get captured by the norm because you need to bring in real expertise and discipline to be able to help them because they've all been doing it the same way. They're all startups, especially in the blockchain world. There really weren't any companies in this sphere 5 years ago, really? I mean, for the
I'd
most
say
part,
like the past 5 to 7 years.
yeah, 5, 7 years. So everything's at the very, very beginning. It is the wild, wild west. Everybody's trying to figure out how to get to Oklahoma and get a piece of the land, right?
Yeah.
Stick their flag
It
in.
is
kind
very.
of situation.
It is very much the territory and the landscape, for sure. When we talk to a range of different clients and prospects in this space, everything from a lot of national firms to global, and a lot of these folks that are building these organizations they're traveling constantly. But if you're going to build it, you have to build it right. So one of the things that we've been doing is really ensuring that before we even start talking about marketing initiatives and what objectives and goals are, is okay, what's the structure of your house, and making sure that they have the right people in place. It really is still a place where everyone's throwing a blockchain event and or a conference of some sort, and looking for, it's a great place to pull sponsors from.
Yeah, right.
And I think that's the biggest thing that I've advised is don't do a sponsorship. Like, this is not that a sponsorship is a bad thing to do, but in this space when you don't have anyone on the inside of your organization to execute on it, there's really no value there. I spoke at a conference 2-3 weeks ago in Brooklyn on technology and emerging brands, and that was one of the the one things I brought up. I can't tell you a single name of one of the companies on the back of my lanyard. So if I can't, then
Right.
I'm not going to sell in that piece. But we definitely are kind of in a unique place growing up in this space because we're definitely being really a strategic advisor in the brand world, from everything from developing brand architecture to truly figuring out, okay, what is going to be the identity of your organization pre, during, and post.
Right now, it's funny. It's an old school company who's reinventing itself, but probably the best known to the consumer is IBM. They've really spent a lot of time and energy and money defining themselves as having an expertise both as a strategist, really as a strategist in blockchain technology. When will we start to see some of the more organic, emerging blockchain companies become, household names? I mean, it took .com one, it took Amazon and eBay and Google and a series of others. Is it 6 months away? Is it 5 years away? Is it?
The long-term stretch of it is it's gonna take a bit. I think everyone's talking about blockchain.
Right.
Even people that don't know what blockchain is.
And almost everyone will start off their discussion about blockchain by uttering the words, "I really don't understand blockchain."
Or I want an ICO. I think what will happen, and Jeff Pulver, who's with Alchemist, has been very much a mentor and somebody that I talk to often, along with the rest of their team.
And also the founder of Vonage.
Yes.
And a cutting edge technologist, not just in the blockchain world, but over the last 20 years.
In technology in general, yeah, he's an absolute genius. So I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with him, obviously with Stephen as well from Alchemist, but Jeff especially, to really talk about the landscape and what's going on in this space. And it will very much be something that just becomes a platform, just the same way you do your normal everyday purchases and engagements. So when you say, how will people be referring it into the household, I think it'll be just the same way you talk about any service, purchase, or sale that you would complete on a normal day. So it'll just be a little bit different, maybe in how you purchase your home or how you do your investing. Or
will blockchain become the brand, or will it be the brand behind the brand?
It'll be the platform. It won't be either.
But you go into a movie and they still talk about Dolby surround sound, right? The movie's brought to you by Dolby surround sound, or some of those things that are the technology behind. Your computer's powered, it's an Apple or another branded product, but it's Intel's inside. Are you going to start to see major companies being fueled by a blockchain component with the platform, and that platform, and then you'll look for that trust in that brand of blockchain?
Yeah. No, I mean, I would hope. I mean, that's what everyone's doing now. I mean, I would like to see a division of G Media be working on a blockchain platform as the future unfolds, without question. Jeff and I were putting together a Think Lab to talk about the impact of brands and setting up their marketing strategy for Q1 of next year, to really help people in the space know how they should be doing their marketing in the blockchain world and the technology space in Q1. So we're going to be working on a white paper together. But yeah, I think it'll very much be just it'll be a layer versus ever referring to blockchain as a brand or anything like that.
But you might have branded platforms.
Branded platforms, but blockchain itself will just be another layer within the system that we're working on.
Let's leave blockchain for a moment. We have a robust economy, but we also have in the world of marketing just tremendous transformation right now. We have, most of our best known forms of advertising are transforming. Obviously, in the past, we've talked about social media, its influence and its growth, and then also its limitations accordingly. Do you see any trends beginning to emerge? The numbers off newspaper groups is almost catastrophic on what their economic performance is and their loss of market share. There's some numbers that show certain key business segments are starting to leave television. Auto is having significant cutbacks there. Give us a forecast of what you're seeing in the next 24 months. How's a brand going to get its message out 24 months from now versus how it is now?
I love that you asked that question. The one thing that we've noticed as, we obviously are focusing more on brand strategy, and we're definitely become a global brand consultancy. And we used to do a lot more in experiential, where we still have that component at G Media, but it's a channel that's tied to the brand. And that's how we really, look at everything, whether it's social, PR, and such. What I'm seeing, especially as we're learning together in this technology space, is having the infrastructure to do your marketing right and having the right people in place, but more so, the most important piece, which has been around forever, but people don't, I guess it's also a little bit hard to digest sometimes, is customer journey mapping from a brand standpoint.
Which is all the interactions that an individual would have with a brand.
Well, it can be. I've done global customer journey mapping for clients such as Hilton Worldwide before their IPO, and it was analyzing every single audience, both internal audience, external stakeholders pre-launch, as well as understanding and interviewing every type of person that engages with the brand, from a transient group to corporate, and figuring out, okay, what's going on and doing that full analysis, but also being able to pull out the pieces that say, okay, here's the things that you can resolve right now. Easy things.
Right.
Like, for instance, I remember one of them was in China. They didn't have a brochure in China for the Hilton Garden Inn.
Right.
Like, I was like, you can do that. That's easy. That's a quick fix. But maybe your sales platform might take 5 years to build out. So that can also, in turn, become your platform of how you're engaging with your media. So that's a big thing that we're doing with a lot of our clients and starting to engage with, even outside of blockchain, just in the technology space, to really have the landscape there, because customer journeys have been around for a very long time, but the difficult part is on the agency side, we understand it because we're doing those interviews and we're understanding the data, but then it gets delivered to the client, and a lot of times, I think I was reading something today, it's 13% are able to take a customer journey map and actually execute on it. So if you can't execute on this great marketing plan, what's the point of it? And
Right.
It's the same thing with like delivering of programmatic data and customer data. If you have it all, that's wonderful, but if you're not using it to your advantage and slicing the data to support your efforts to get in front of the right audiences, then what's the point?
Well, and there's a lot of pushback about big data and all these companies collecting a lot of data, not knowing what to do with it, and also becoming slaves to it, which can create a false god, because
Yeah.
at the end of the day, there is an emotional connection between how consumers feel about their experience with a product or a service. And just data doesn't always show that. Average time on the website or email opening or those types of components to it doesn't necessarily peel back the onion to get to those really important elements of
Authenticity.
I like them. I trust them. I want to be a part of them. I want them a part of my life.
Yeah.
I want to buy them for my children.
Yeah.
Whatever those other components might be. You still didn't answer my question about what's it going to look like in 24 months. Is there going to be a different relationship between consumers and brands, and do you see any trends? In certain segments, listen, you look out the window here on West Boston Street and you see bird scooters go zooming by. Well, kind of cool. Here comes one right now, right? Here comes somebody who probably commuted one way a few years ago and is now on an orange bike that they plug in their credit card off an app and they're off and running. Well, cool, fun. Not good if I own an auto dealership in New England, watching person after person go zooming by, and also watching all these young people enjoying the experience of scootering and not having that love of, God, I can't wait to get my first car or get
And put gas in it that's going to pollute the environment. I mean, it's different.
We're seeing
Obviously,
a transformation
we're seeing-
in transportation.
it means we're getting old. No, but I mean, we do have to address it. I mean, there's everything that goes right down to the millennials, and on the next every other generation. They don't want to engage with a brand that does like the whitewashing, or even the greenwashing. Like, we're saying we're doing everything we can to make sure your product's safe. Unless you're actually doing it, they're not going to work, and they're not going to play for you, and they're not going to be your brand ambassador. So I think that's a big piece of it too, is finding the niche of how you can make people speak on your behalf and of your brand and be excited and engaged with it, and they have to take a stance. I didn't answer your question, but I never answer your questions.
See any trends emerging? See anything unusual that you go, aha, that could be applicable to all our clients? Some of the things is, we just discussed, changing modes of transportation. Well, God, if 20% of the population now no longer is driving their car to work, maybe that outdoor billboard campaign along the highways not as strategic and have the same value accordingly. Are you seeing anything else emerge that companies should look at and think about in building their workforce, building their consumer strategy, building their B2B strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I see a lot, and even right now, I see, a lot of folks that we talk to, there's, a lot of companies, and it's not a great thing, but it's very common. You have a digital strategy in place, or you don't have a digital strategy, Yeah, I'm sorry. So you don't have a digital strategy, but you're leveraging all of the channels, right? So you really need to do that first step.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just kind of throwing it against the wall and hoping it works out. So from the digital standpoint for PR and social, you really have to have a plan in place.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, you're not gonna break through, and you're not
Well,
gonna
and good economies give you a false sense of security, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody's doing well and everybody's spending money and everybody's buying stuff. Then the economy slows down, and all of a sudden you better be ready to go, and you better feel comfortable and confident that when you spend your marketing dollars, they're going to be effective because you've gone through that process. Is it kind of like, what is it, 12 steps? Is the first thing you have to do is realize you have a problem? I mean, is that really from a brand
No,
strat-
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is actually a lot of the conversations that I'm having with our
And with smart
prospects and
companies. These
clients.
aren't,
No.
this isn't the one-off dry cleaner
No,
you're
no, no.
talking to.
I'm talking to brilliant people that are brilliant in their space, but it also reminds me what a great team I have behind me because we're experts in the brand space.
Right.
And yeah, it's making sure your house is set up because if you have marketing initiatives that you want to take on, and you have nobody in your house that can liaise with your agency, or thinks you can, or sometimes think you could just pull it off in your house without marketing expertise, you can lose a lot of money. But I think people are open to hearing.
Not only misspend, but then lose market share, more importantly.
Yeah. And I think it goes right back to audiences too. You know, I talk to a lot of companies who say, okay, this is the audience I want to be talking to for B2C, and this is who I want to be talking to in B2B. And then I asked the question, I think just last week, I said to somebody, I said, what is an audience that you think you should potentially be in front of that you haven't thought about? And they're like, well, I haven't thought about them. I'm like, we should start talking about the audiences you're not thinking of, that you could potentially be potentially selling more from the B2C side and from the B2B. So, yeah, it's just kind of looking at everything.
Any indications? How are you feeling about the economy? Clients feeling about the economy?
I think right now we're going into November. I think everybody's, obviously in the midst of doing their Q1 planning. So, that's why Jeff Pulver and I are really kind of planning out this big lab.
Everybody rushes, especially bigger companies, to get their Q1 or their annual, their next year's plan done, and then they do literally nothing till March. It is just about.
I even look at it as, okay, we're getting ready for Q1 as your agency. We should be talking in November, December, solidifying the plan so we can kick off right in Q1.
Yeah.
And that's why March ends up being the kickoff date, because you're like, okay, I got my budget locked, and now I'm ready to go. I think we have to move everything up a quarter for planning on the client side. But
and make pushing things off a little bit illegal, because that just seems to be that natural beginning of the year. We'll push it back.
Yeah.
Save the money in January and February. Nobody spends in January and February. But I like the Sam Walton. One year there was a terrible recession. He doubled down his marketing spend. He said, why are you spending so much more than your competitors? He said, I decided not to participate in the recession. So
I love it.
I want to thank you so much.
Thank
Megan
you.
Decker from G Media Studios, talking everything from brand strategy to what's going on in blockchain. Appreciate everybody tuning in for the 4 o'clock hour on Business Money. Thank our friends over at Deepwater Wind. We'll be back tomorrow. I think mayoral candidate Dee Dee Whitman is in at 3 o'clock, and then Kate Nagel's got the 4 o'clock hour. But don't hold me to it because it seems to change every day. But welcome back, everybody, to Monday. Congratulations to the Boston Red Sox. We'll see you back on live tomorrow afternoon. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.